This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo, coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, like most global markets, emerging market equities declined today for a fourth straight session. This will now be their longest losing streak in 4 months on rising worries about the economic impact from a virus outbreak in China. MSCI's index for emerging market equities fell 0.7% today, tracking stock market losses across Asia. On the continent, South Africa's JSE continuing its losing streak for a second day as those coronavirus fears weighed on sentiment. We saw banks, financials, as well as gold miners, some of the biggest losers on the bourse today. Now, also coming up on the show, President George Weah plans to open up bids for oil and gas exploration to revive Liberia's growth. Chinese tech giant Huawei secures limited participation in the UK's 5G network rollout. And Nigeria hits the mainstream with the Oxford English Dictionary, inking 29 Nigerian phrases. Well, let's kick off today's show in Liberia, where President George Weah has announced that the West African nation will launch a call for bids to resume offshore oil and gas exploration projects. That's after years of stagnation. After 2 years in office, Weah recalled how he had promised to promote oil and gas exploration as a potential source of revenue for the poor country.
President Weah made his annual national address, during which he said the amendments to the law on petroleum passed last year hold great possibilities for oil exploration for Liberia.
My fellow Liberians, I am pleased to announce to you today that the government of Liberia, through the Liberia Petroleum Regulatory Authority, will open up the entire Harbour Basin during the next lesson round beginning in April.
The basin where the 9 new blocks are located is part of the last region off the coast of Western Africa, which has yet to be explored for potential reserves.
9 offshore blocks will be put up, allowing competent and reputable international oil and gas companies to bid with the hope of recommencing exploration program.
Since the departure of Exxon and Chevron from Liberia in 2016-2017, there have been no exploration work offshore Liberia, and the sector has been hanging on by a thread. Liberia's last bid round was concluded in December of 2014 with over $60 million in commitments, but concluded unsuccessfully due to political wrangling between the executive and the legislative branches of government. Experts say the importance of Liberia's next bid round cannot be overstated and will determine all future successes for Liberia's fledgling oil sector that has suffered the waves of back-to-back civil conflict. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, let's now find out more about President Weah's third State of the Nation address. Political analyst Daniel Sando now joins us in Monrovia via phone. Great to have you on the show with us, Mr. Sando. Now, President Weah did say that this year will be a year of practicality and progress for Liberia. Did he elaborate what he meant by this? And certainly, what are the key takeaways from his State of the Nation address?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think Liberians listen to the president when he spoke yesterday. There are many feedback from the president, State of the Nation address so far. But basically, to the question that you asked, that President Weah talked about this year being a year of practicality and progress. I think the only available barometer that we can use to kind of analyze and x-ray the performance of the Weah administration so far is precedent, how the government has proceeded, what the government has done over the last couple of years. that will inform our decision moving forward as analysts. I think the last 2 years under the Weir administration have not been so positive. There are a lot of the economy of the country, for example, have experienced serious setback to the extent that civil servants are not being paid on time, and the economy has dwindled under his leadership, and very little steps has been taken to ensure that the country is fully reconciled. So, relatively, the feedback from the president's speech, there are mixed reaction from Liberians across the 15 political subdivisions of our country, and most Liberians would have expected for the president to actually address the practical issues confronting the country, the terrible state of the economy, the fact that he has not been able to live up to the expectation of people who voted for him from 14 political subdivisions alone, speaks volume to the inability to deliver on most of the campaign promises. So, among other things, I think the president didn't really, his statement, he didn't really speak to the issue, because when he talked about his economy and financial system being in sound and healthy state, many Liberians are concerned. An economy that cannot afford civil servants to be paid on time, a system that people will have to form long queue right now in the country. There is shortage of petroleum in the country. People have to form long queue at various gas stations. There is no petroleum in the country. Even the banks have run out of cash. So, basically, the takeaway from the president's annual message is not very helpful for the nation. He didn't speak to the bread and butter issues that Liberians expected him to address. Many Liberians were hopeful that the president, through the annual message, offered a kind of green light for prosperity in the country, but instead, all we heard were mere equivocal and political pronouncements.
Well, let's talk a little bit about his track record so far and the state of Liberia's economy. He did say he will lift the country out of poverty, reduce waste in government, fight corruption as well. But looking at the economy, growth projected to contract by 1.4% in 2019, inflation at about 28%. Give us a sense of what citizens in Liberia are struggling with now, and whether his track record has delivered on any of those promises he made.
Of course, the track record of the overall performance of the Weir administration since the inception of his presidency 2 years ago have not been very encouraging. The overall message from the president is that the state of the nation is stable, which is contrary to empirical facts. The economy of this country is in a very terrible shape. Prices of goods and services, ranging from rice to transportation, including the price of other basic commodities, even the nation's stable rice, are increasing on a daily basis, right? Even amongst the country's youthful population, unemployment is increasing on an exponential basis. President Weir, in the last annual message, promised to have provided thousands of jobs for young people. Those jobs have not been provided. And the reason why I said the president was very vague and political in his annual message, because he didn't really speak to the fact that how many jobs his government has created for the young people. The country has a very youthful population that remain unemployed. Unemployment is a major challenge. And, so teachers and nurses, talking about the civil servants, teachers, nurses, and doctors, civil servants are not being paid on time. Like I said, Liberians have to stay in long queue to withdraw money from the banks. Sometimes you go to the bank to withdraw money, they have to limit the amount of money that the bank give you. And most recently, currently in the country, the country has ran out of petroleum product. So all of these things signify to the point that the country economy is in a very terrible state, and there's nothing that the government has opted to do to improve these conditions. So for him to be saying that, this year will be a year of practicality, given the fact that the economy, the government has failed to take actions in fighting corruption to ensure that deterrent is being set for people who want to be perpetrated of corruption, because of course Liberia is very poor because of corruption in public sector. The president and his government has failed to do so. The issue of asset declaration has remained very elusive. They have refused to declare the asset. And with all the things happening, the country economy is in a terrible shape, and Liberians can only be hopeful that if any practical actions be taken for things to change,
right.
the president himself has to double up.
Well, on that note, as you're talking about hope there is a deal with the International Monetary Fund on the table right now, which could offer some hope of a turnaround in the economy. What are the details of that plan? Now, some say it could be coming late. Do you agree with that?
Well, before I go to that question, let me just indicate. Lastly, before I go to that question, that the track record of the government has not been very impressive. The government has been reneging on taking practical action in fighting corruption. The president himself and officials of the government have failed to declare the assets. Okay, you have a lot of off-budget spending. Even the very speech he gave yesterday, the president indicated that the country has received some loans and grants from foreign partners. And he started to realize that those money were never accounted for in the national budget. So I think they have a very poor track record. Liberians can only be hopeful that things can change for the better. But as far as the record of the government is concerned, they are very poor. So looking at the
IMF
involvement of the IMF, I think the IMF initial involvement is to put into place some practical steps, to take some practical steps at the central bank of Liberia. Of course, the central bank is one thing what the government has used to carry out all of the clandestine operation, the issue of the 16 billion that cannot be accounted for. We talk about 25 million mobile exercise, the investigative report that was conducted by the presidential investigative team, and the co-report that was hired by the UCA to conduct a report on the missing 16 billion and the 25 million mobile exercise all indicate that there were series of lapses at the central bank of Liberia. And so the involvement of the IMF, it's not necessarily to say that it comes to rescue the economy of Liberia. It just to put some initial mechanism and hospital mechanism in place so that things can be done the right way. But it is not any kind of giveaway for the Liberian government to see they can realize that because the involvement of the IMF, inflation is going to reduce, the exchange rate is going to be stabilized. It's not going to help the economy because, as far as we're concerned, it has the buck starts with the president, and he, as much as the government has failed to take some, practical austerity measures, these things are not going to improve. Talk about inflation, it's hovering around 28%. And the biggest challenge now facing Liberia, as a country is the fact that the government has failed to take, practical action to address the bread and butter issue. The economy is in a very terrible shape, and people cannot even afford to take pay on time, to pay the school fees of their children. People are now. The situation is so terrible than what it was 12 years ago because these are people who are used to taking pay, for the last 12 years regularly. Okay, and Liberians use the earning to cater to the family needs. So you have a new government. That cannot really live up to the expectation of the people.
Certainly,
many jobs have been lost also through the harmonization process. The government has promised to create thousands of jobs in the last year. They are failed to do so. And even the harmonization process.
Certainly a tough situation there in Liberia. I'm sorry, I do have to interrupt you because we've run out of time. But we're certainly watching the situation there. Many thanks for joining us. That was Daniel Sando. He's a political analyst joining us there from Monrovia. Well, let's move on now to Nigeria. The fear of a further spike in inflation has compelled the country's central bank monetary policy committee to adopt a tightening stance. It is raising the cash reserve ratio for banks in the country from 22.5% to a new level of 27.5%. Now, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele says the move will mop up excess liquidity in Nigeria's economy, as well as check a rising inflation, which has been on an upward trajectory since August last year. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more.
With Nigeria's inflation on a steady rise over the past 4 months, something needed to be done to check it before it spiraled out of control. And that's exactly what the Monetary Policy Committee did, responding by jacking up the cash reserve ratio from 22.5% to 27.5%. Nigeria's current inflation rate is at 11.98%, partly blamed on insecurity in some parts of the country and the closure of the country's border.
Monetary policy felt compelled that we need to begin to look at what can be done to reverse the trend of this rising level of inflation and prices. And hence, the committee felt in its wisdom that realizing that there's a lot of liquidity in the market, there was a need for the bank to do something to mop the excess liquidity to a level that it considers optimal to be able to run the economy in a way that the level of excess liquidity does not become injurious to the economy.
Last year, Nigeria's central bank raised the loan-to-deposit ratio for commercial banks to 65%. Some fear the MPC decision to raise the CRR and mop up liquidity in the banking system could have a negative consequence on commercial banks' ability to lend and thereby defeat the whole essence of the LDR initiative.
Deposit money banks must be compelled, like we are using prudentials, to ensure that they continue to grant loans to the private sector of the economy. And committee felt that, yes, whereas we're trying to remove the excess liquidity from the market so as to operate within an optimal level of liquidity that is needed for the economy, that the CBN should continue to push on the loan deposit ratio, since that was already giving us the kind of results that we expect.
With Nigeria's reserve dwindling in recent months and inflow of foreign capital slowing down, some analysts had been forecasting a possible currency devaluation at some point this year. But the CBN governor is resolute that there's nothing like that in the offing.
A reserve level of about 38 today, right? And crude price at above 57, 60, 65, sometimes hit 70. We believe that we will be able, and we are saying that we should continue to sustain the existing FX, foreign exchange management and stability that we've seen in the market. There's no need for anybody to ever think that an adjustment would happen.
Everything hinges on the price of crude. Should there be a sudden crash in price below the budget benchmark of $57, then devaluation might become inevitable. But the Monetary Policy Committee also warned that the country needs to check its rising debt level and look at other ways of raising revenue to drive the economy. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And now a look at our corporate headlines today. ExxonMobil Corporation has signed 2 deals with Egypt for oil and gas exploration in the Mediterranean. Now, the deals involve a minimum investment of $332 million. This comes after Exxon announced the acquisition of more than 1.7 million acres last month. The move is in line with Egypt's plan to position itself as an energy hub in the eastern Mediterranean, importing gas from Israel and exporting to Jordan and potentially to Europe and Asia. Meanwhile, in South Africa, the share price of Blue Label Telecoms, which is the largest shareholder of Cell C, slumped more than 13% on a Tuesday. This follows reports that the struggling mobile operator had defaulted on interest payments due in December and January. Now, those payments were for a $184 million bond with Nedbank, the China Development Bank Corporation, and the Development Bank of Southern Africa, as well as the Commercial Bank of China. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, let us head into a quick break now, still to come. Barrick is set to ship gold worth up to $280 million from Tanzania. And South African Airlines secures yet another bailout, this time from the Development Bank of Southern Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head out now.
rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, mining firm Barrick Gold will start to ship gold worth up to $280 million from Tanzania. That's after the government lifted an export ban following the resolution of a 3-year tax dispute. Well, Chief Executive Mark Bristow said the world's second largest gold miner signed a deal on Friday with Tanzania's government, ending a row that dated back to when Acacia Mining ran its Tanzanian operations. Bristow also said the shipments will start immediately and confirmed the company was mobilizing the concentrates. Bristow also says that $100 million from the proceeds of the sale of concentrates will go towards paying down a $300 million settlement, which was agreed on with the government. As part of the deal, Tanzania will own 16% of Twiga Minerals, a new joint venture which was set up to manage the Bulyanhulu, the North Mara and the Buzwagi mines. Meanwhile, Kenya's economy is forecast to grow 6.2% this year. That's up from 5.7% last year. Central Bank Governor Patrick Njoroge accredited regional trade for shielding Kenya from the effects of a global downturn. The bank expects the recovering agriculture sector, small and medium enterprises, as well as robust private sector credit growth to support that boost in growth. Now, on Monday, the central bank did cut the benchmark lending rate for the second meeting in a row to 8.25% from 8.5%. It said the economy was operating below potential and it saw room for a more accommodative monetary policy stance. East Africa's richest economy is enjoying an extended rainy season after several years of drought. The government also lifted caps on bank lending rates last year, which had inhibited loans to private business. Meanwhile, South African Airways has secured a $244 million emergency fund from the state-owned Development Bank of South Africa. At the moment, SAA is fighting for survival. The new year saw the embattled national carrier anxiously awaiting a $137 million emergency cash promised by the government. That's when it entered bankruptcy protection last December. However, South Africa's National Treasury has been reluctant to commit further state funds as a part of that strategy. SAA has not made a profit since 2011. Instead, it has been surviving on more than $1.3 billion in bailouts over the last 3 years. This has put South Africa's credit rating and investor confidence under increasing pressure. And still in South Africa, the country has warned travelers to be alert and keep up to date with information about the coronavirus. South Africa does attract thousands of Chinese tourists every year. Tourism authorities fear a decline in tourist numbers as a result of that outbreak. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu with more.
The virus is contagious, and those who contract it might not even know. It's common in animals and birds, and only some spread the disease to humans.
It's a novel coronavirus, so it's a completely new virus that has not been seen before. So at this moment, the data is still being collected, and most of the experts are still working on the mode of transmission, how long it's going to incubate for. Some people, they may start to transmit this virus even before they become symptomatic.
Over 100,000 Chinese visited South Africa in 2018. The Department of Tourism is pushing to double this figure by 2021. But this virus has the potential to wipe out all tourism gains and further impact this already weak economy.
South Africa hasn't issued a travel ban as yet, but says it is monitoring the situation closely. China and South Africa are key trading partners. Thousands of Chinese people also live and work here and travel abroad frequently. International SOS is appealing to anyone feeling symptoms to seek assistance immediately.
Currently, there's no treatment, so the treatment will be mainly supportive. So that means, if you have pneumonia or if you need help trying to breathe, then we put you on the ventilator and other medication to help you breathe better.
The timing couldn't be worse for South Africa. This economy too is in poor health, but health authorities say they're prepared.
This virus is spread just like the common cold. So it's when you cough or sneeze, or even when you have any respiratory secretions onto other people. So we are recommending general precautions. So for example, don't touch your face and make sure that you wash your hands regularly with soap and water for at least 20 to 30 seconds at a time. And if you don't have access to water, then carry a small bottle of alcohol hand sanitizer.
International SOS has set up a central website with constant updates on the virus. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg.
In Tunisia, while no cases of coronavirus have been reported there yet, the country's health ministry is taking precautions. Airports, ports and border crossings will be equipped with temperature sensors. CGTN's Adnan Shaushi with the latest.
Travelers suspected of being infected will be placed in an equipped, isolated room to undergo necessary analysis in a laboratory set up by the Ministry of Health.
The necessary tests are first carried out on the suspects in an isolated hall inside the Tunis Carthage Airport. If the test results are positive, patients will be taken by ambulance to the isolation units at the hospital.
The airport medical teams and civil aviation officials have been informed of the lists of people coming from China so that they can take the necessary preventive measures.
The temperature sensors for passengers installed at Tunis Carthage Airport will help identify people coming from China suspected of having contracted the coronavirus. We have also a list of travelers to China and other countries where people were infected.
Health authorities stress that efforts are being made to monitor the epidemiological situation related to the coronavirus through the National Observatory for New and Emerging Diseases, the Strategic Center for Health Operations, and the National Laboratory.
The World Health Organization has not yet declared the coronavirus a global emergency and has not recommended any travel or trade restrictions. We are ready to intervene if the situation changes.
The Ministry of Health will remain in touch with people arriving from China for 12 days after their arrival to check their health condition. The minister affirmed her service's ability to provide isolation units in hospitals to separate patients and to protect medical personnel working there in case of an emergency. Tunisian health authorities are distributing brochures and leaflets to travelers from all airports, ports and border crossings, containing the necessary information, recommendations and figures as part of its coronavirus prevention plan. Aden Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Nigeria's commercial capital of Lagos has announced a ban on commercial motorcycles and tricycles in large parts of the city. The government says from February, commercial motorcycles and tricycles will no longer be allowed to operate on 50 highways and bridges. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on that.
The announcement of the ban does not come as a surprise at all, and it's actually nothing new. The state government had actually enacted a law banning the operations of commercial motorcycles and tricycles in certain parts of the city since 2018, but it had relaxed on the enforcement of the law, allowing the so-called Okada and Keke Napep operators to break the law with impunity. Now, with the number of these operators swelling and the rate of accidents going up, the government is now being compelled to act. It also cited security reasons as well for the renewed ban.
From 2016 to 2019, there were over 10,000 accidents recorded at the general hospitals alone. This number excludes unreported cases and those recorded by other hospitals. The total number of deaths from reported cases is over 600 as at date. The rate of crime cited by motorcycles and tricycles keeps rising. Motorcycles and tricycles are also used as getaway means by criminals.
Now, in the past year or so, several bike-hailing operators have made entry into the Lagos market, cashing in on the congestion in the city to make money by commuting people around. This ban will definitely affect their operations and threaten their huge investments. And for millions of residents who have come to rely on their services to beat the notorious Lagos traffic, they too will be affected. But the ban does not mean commercial motorcycles and tricycles now will disappear from Lagos roads. They would still be allowed to operate on inner city roads. Besides, if the government relaxes again on enforcement of the law, as we have seen in the past, you can expect Okadas and Kekes to resurface on the city's highways. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. Let's take a quick break. Still to come. Chinese tech giant Huawei secures limited participation in the UK's 5G network rollout. And millennials slowly caution top brands to be more conscious about climate change.
No one again, he can holding guns. Machine guns from police forces towards the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
Data out of the country, the country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures. we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
I'm Uche Okoronkwo reporting from Nairobi City Centre.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are these stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Now, Britain has approved the limited use of Huawei Technologies equipment in the country's rollout of 5G mobile network. Under the new terms, Huawei will be excluded from sensitive sites such as nuclear facilities and military bases. Now, the firm will also have its UK market share capped at 35%. The decision comes at a critical moment. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is likely to face fierce backlash from the US, which has blocked the involvement of Huawei in its networks and encourage its allies to follow suit. The Trump administration claims the company poses a national security risk given its alleged links to Beijing. It had warned that if London gave Huawei a role, then it could scale back intelligence cooperation. And staying in the UK, the country is set to finally leave the European Union this Friday. The Brexit process was an extremely divisive issue that split Britain in half over the past few years. Well, January 31st will be seen as a day of salvation for the Leave campaign. But as CGTN's Richard Bestick now explores, those who wanted to remain say they will refocus their efforts.
For 3.5 long years, the 16 million people in Britain who voted to remain in the European Union campaigned hard for a second say. Now a defeated force, albeit planning a way back against outwardly insurmountable parliamentary odds.
We have a movement of people behind us. During the People's Vote campaign, we had 1 million people on the streets, and we have 126 local activist groups around the country. So the fight back starts in local communities.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is now safely ensconced in Downing Street. With what he calls a stonking majority, resistance to his Brexit plans apparently futile. Denying accusations of triumphalism, Brexiteers launched an ultimately failed campaign that Big Ben, currently undergoing renovation, should ring out their victory at the moment of the UK's departure from the EU, 11 p.m. on January 31st. Johnson quick to pass round the hat to pay for it.
We're working up a plan so that people can bung a bob for a Big Ben bong.
The latest opinion poll for a British newspaper suggests a Brexit change since the 2016 referendum, with a narrow majority, 52% now in favour of Remain, a direct switch from the original result. The man they call Mr. Stop Brexit, Steve Bray, told me he'll continue the fight, but this time with a new shout.
Why Brexit?
In reality, it's going to be a long haul for the Remainers. Some activists, perhaps optimistically, say that within a decade, Britain will be reapplying for membership of the European Union, that Brexit will have been demonstrated to be a disastrous experiment. For the time being, though, and for the near future, it's the Brexiteers who are in control. Richard Bestick, CGTN, London.
Well, let's shift our focus now to the growth of the digital economy in the Middle East. CGTN's Cheng Lei has sat down with Abdullah Al-Swaha. He is Saudi Arabia's Minister of Communications and Information Technology. Now, the minister discussed what Saudi Arabia will be doing with the Digital Economy Task Force in the country's upcoming year of the G20 presidency.
And we're seeing the dialogues right now coming up on AI ethics, on data and on cyber resilience. And we're trying to steer the conversation between those that are pro-consumer, pro-privacy, those that are pro-big tech, and how they can come to a middle ground where if you look at the use cases, so I'll share with you one example we're working with some of the Chinese AI companies on. There's 19 million children today that are born with eye infections and eye disease. If we are able to leverage the compute power that we have in our smartphones with algorithms, with AI, with data, we can have early detection and we can save these children to have a brighter future. So these are use cases and live examples about how closing down the digital divide and the polarization in the digital world can be for good for the world and the prosperity of everybody.
But having covered the China-US trade war the past 2 years, the narrative is that China and the US might be heading for a splinter net. How will Saudi Arabia, when G20 convenes, how will it get consensus, get that communique out?
The world today is so interconnected. When anything happens in the East or the West, we're all impacted. When you guys catch a flu, we all catch a cold, and we're seeing it today. And that's why it's so necessary that we sit on the table. And I'll share with you a few examples. So on taxes, while we don't have all of the answers, finally everybody is acknowledging on the how, not the why and the what. With the OECD digital tax framework, we're finally seeing a light in the end of the tunnel. On an AI ethics, everybody is acknowledging similar to climate change. Climate safety cannot be a unilateral decision. There has to be consensus. Similarly, the trustworthiness and the ethics in AI has to be a collective effort.
The US doesn't agree on climate change?
Well, when we're talking about climate change, today we're seeing President Trump supporting the 1 trillion implantation of trees, which is an initiative that the G20 have started up with the Saudi presidency. Professor Klaus announced it yesterday. We're very bullish and optimistic that while there is this polarization, we will see light at the end of the tunnel.
And tell me about this 5G rollout that Saudi Arabia has carried out very fast.
So in 2019, we celebrated being the 3rd largest 5G deployment in partnership with partners from the East and the West. Today we became number 4 because China decided to wake up and start rolling out more towers on that space. But it has been phenomenal. What we have seen that 5G is igniting for us new use cases. So let me give you a few use cases we're experimenting with. Gaming. We're one of the biggest, largest markets when it comes on the consumption side. When it comes on the supply side, this is an opportunity to build an ecosystem with cloud gaming, not only for the kingdom, but for the region. Other use cases with industrial IoT coming up in mining, in other industries, how we can extract the value while leapfrogging in these aspects.
Now, climate change and protecting the environment were the issues that topped the agenda at this year's World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The millennial generation is increasingly shunning consumerism because of their concerns about climate change. Now, analysts are saying that's going to be a major challenge for brands because they will have to change their business models in order to adapt to this trend. With the details, here's Rebecca Bunton.
Millennials are the target market for many high street brands, but more and more people from this generation seem to be turning away from consumerism.
I like fashion, right? But I try not to buy fast fashion anymore because now I feel guilty. It's not just now because of the new trend, but it's more like I think about also the environment too, but working conditions.
Consuming is not cool as 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I guess. Even with my friends, when we are in conversation, we're talking about things, especially about consuming, and yeah.
The millennial generation makes up 1/4 of the world's population, so companies can't afford to ignore their views.
the young people are always those that are naturally most concerned about the future. And so, if you look around, there are wildfires in Australia, there are protests, there are records of increasing temperatures. There's a lot of concern about environmental things, and young people are willing to actually change their behavior and to react to this. And some of this we see as young people shunning consumerism.
Shops say that millennial consumers are increasingly asking questions about where their products are from, how long they'll last, and how they might be able to recycle them eventually. That's not a good fit for the fast fashion business model, for example, which is known for producing clothes cheaply in developing countries. It's also something that can impact choices about travel and food.
A survey by Deloitte reveals that among the challenges facing society, climate change and protecting the environment is the biggest concern for millennials, with 29% saying it's their most pressing worry. The survey suggests that it's even more of a concern for the generation than issues including unemployment and terrorism.
Some brands are adapting to this trend. H&M, for instance, has its Conscious collection range, with clothes made from recycled or environmentally friendly materials, such as polyester produced from recycled plastic bottles. Other companies will have to change to survive, experts say.
What should companies do? I think at the minimum, they should try to hop onto the trend and make the existing products, whatever they sell, fit with the times, and think about, protecting the environments more. But there's also an opportunity there for entirely new brands, for entirely new concepts, for new products to enter the market.
Millennials' concerns may be a threat to companies, but some say there is also opportunity lurking in keeping up with the millennial generation's demands. Rebecca Bunsen, CGTN, Frankfurt.
And concerns over food safety are once again in the spotlight following the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan. One joint project between China and the UK is studying bird diseases in the hopes of protecting livestock. Here's CGTN's Naweed Jabrakil reporting.
For more than 3 decades, Professor Venugopal Nair has been studying birds and what makes them sick. His work, along with Chinese researchers, could have an impact on thousands of farmers worldwide. CIRAD is a virtual network of British and Chinese scientists that was launched in 2015 to combat avian diseases. Its aim is to help raise standards in the global poultry industry.
The research taking place here is of particular interest to China, as it has more chickens than any other country in the world. But it's also facing a shortage of meat, as millions of pigs have been affected by an outbreak of African swine fever across Southeast Asia. And as Chinese demand for other types of protein grows, the safety of that food is high on the agenda.
In 2019, several cases of bird flu were reported in China, with tens of thousands of poultry culled as a result. And Chinese imports of chicken are surging too, reaching a value of $1.3 billion in the first 9 months of last year, a rise of almost 48% year on year.
So there is a huge increase in the poultry industry at the moment, which puts in a lot of pressure on diseases also. So controlling these diseases to make more poultry, meat and eggs is another challenge.
Dr. Yongshu Yao was one of the founding members of CIRAD and oversees other Chinese researchers here on the outskirts of London. She thinks the project is evidence of the growing research ties between the two countries.
Because we have been collaborating for the last 10 years or so, and we have several research fundings, and we have joint research projects going on. And then both sides are benefiting from the collaboration, and that's why the science is not to do with politics.
CIRAD missed out on the Newton Prize this month, but despite falling short, the scientists here are hoping their work can improve the lives of millions of birds, as well as the safety of our food. Naweed Jabakil, CGTN, Woking in England.
And staying with the coronavirus outbreak, China has ramped up the production of protective equipment to meet the needs of thousands of medical workers, especially in Wuhan. CGTN reporter He Weiwei in the southern province of Guangdong takes us to a factory that's operating 24/7 to meet the urgent demand.
80 tons worth of non-woven fabrics. That is the daily production at its factory here in Foshan, a city renowned for being a manufacturing hub. At this rate, these materials can be used to make 1 million surgical masks or 400,000 protective suits. Orders have surged over the past few days.
The orders that we have received within the past 3 to 4 days are even more than the total of what we usually receive for a whole month.
We resumed a production line which was suspended during the Lunar New Year holiday. Some employees returned at 5 o'clock this morning to get back to work.
The factory is at its maximum production level now. Over 120 staff are working around the clock on 3-shift rotations. These 2 rolls of fabrics are among today's productions. Now, let's take a look at the label here. The date, January 27, made in China, and here, age 12. What does it mean? It's the standard. The highest standard of such fabric is age 13, and 12 means it's the second highest standard. And that means these fabrics can be made into a N95 mask, something like this. And this is for doctors' use, and is now facing a shortage in China. The factory says it will try to guarantee a stable supply and price. But a major difficulty now is the shortage of labor in downstream factories.
It takes time to process these materials into complete medical supplies. For example, a worker can only produce 20 protective suits per day at most. So it is a problem when the factories cannot find that many workers to make enough supplies in a timely manner.
The manager says one solution is to buy more machines for production, a suggestion the government is now considering. He Weiwei, CGTN, Foshan City, Guangdong Province.
Well, let us shift focus now and take a look at how commodities performed today. Gold prices dropping from yesterday's near 3-week highs as equity markets stabilized today. That's after a flight to safety in the last few sessions seemingly ended. But the precious metal is still cushioned from heavy losses on the back of lingering concerns that the coronavirus outbreak could affect the global economy. Oil prices still hovering below $60 per barrel today. Oil futures were set for a 6th day of losses as the death toll from the virus arose. However, a heavy sell-off in recent sessions was curbed by output outages in Libya and comments from OPEC that are helping calm demand fears in the market. Well, let's take a short break now, still coming up. Nigeria hits the mainstream with the Oxford English Dictionary inking 29 Nigerian phrases.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN. See the difference.
Now, corruption has a new name, at least so says the Oxford English Dictionary, and that name is chop. Hailing from the streets of Nigeria, the verb meaning to illicitly make money was added to the Oxford English Dictionary this month, along with 28 other phrases such as rub minds. Now, it is the first time Nigerian English has made an appearance. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala with more on that.
When a Nigerian says, I have saved enough money to buy a 2-combo, iron, kettle or fridge, the person actually means they are buying a second-hand item. This is one of the colloquialisms of Nigerian English that have made it into the latest updates of the Oxford English Dictionary.
The way you speak in the public, it looks as if that you are not using a right English word. But this time around, anytime that you are calling Tukumbo, you know that yes, it's a recognized English, no matter where you speak it.
Since the 1970s and 80s, locals have adopted several words and phrases that make up what is known as Pidgin English. It's a mix of English and words from local languages and a range of street slang in Nigeria.
Many people might take it for granted, but it forms a large part of our identities. And when it is being suppressed, or we are being told that there is a better way, or this is what is correct and then this is what's not correct, I think it affects us and it also demeans us.
But getting Nigerian English to be recognized globally was a bit of a challenge.
When we write our characters speaking this Nigerian English, we struggle with foreign editors in the past. It took a lot of action, and we really had to insist that this is actually who we are, who we speak. So it will make things easier. So next time an editor tells you several is not correct, you say go and check the Oxford Dictionary.
Other words that made it to the dictionary include danfu, which is the local word for the yellow mini buses. Phrases like mama put, which describes the local street side food seller, and okada, which means motorcycle taxis. This inclusion is making many Nigerians proud.
I like almost every of those words. Okada is a very popular word. There's no day I go I don't see Okada in my mouth. Because I have to stop an Okada man. If I'm driving, I come across Okada people that get me angry. I have to say Okada. So for the fact that Okada is in an English dictionary, it will not be very difficult for me to explain to a white man when he's asking, what's Okada? You know, I said, go and check your English dictionary. What's Mama Put? Please check your English dictionary.
The rapid global rise of Nigerian pop culture across music, film and literature over the last 2 decades has meant that Nigerian use of English has more listeners and readers than ever before. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Well, we will end today's show on that note, but before we go, a quick look at Africa's currencies today. South Africa's rand extending losses against the dollar for a fourth day as the global risk-off environment persists. Now, the rand did weaken to a 6-week low on Monday as investors remain concerned about the effect of that virus, and of course the effect it could have on the global economy. In Kenya, the shilling remains broadly stable against the dollar. Of course, market players were eyeing a central bank monetary policy meeting, which was expected today. That's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.